Your Excellency Dr. Mohammed bin Saleh Al-Sada, Minister of Energy and Industry, Honorable Ambassadors, Dr. Khalid Al Hashmi, Dean of Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to welcome you to the inaugural program for Georgetown University's new regionally focused Executive Masters in Emergency and Disaster Management degree. Today's gathering marks the beginning of an important milestone in expanding Georgetown University's offerings and support in Qatar. As the incoming Dean of the Qatar campus, it's heartening to see the expansion of our support for Qatari and regional students beyond our undergraduate Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service degree. And today's program and the cohort of students in attendance mark only the beginning of things to come from Georgetown University. The focus on emergency and disaster management is very timely and appropriate for our region. We have all witnessed a steady increase in the number and magnitude of both natural and man-made emergencies and disasters. The impact of these upon our societies has greatly increased, becoming a major obstacle to sustainable development. That is why it is important that we are here today to spread awareness, educate, network, and collaborate as effectively as possible in the field of emergency and disaster management. Georgetown School of Continuing Studies has been offering an outstanding degree in the field of emergency and disaster management, a degree that takes a sophisticated and holistic approach to the field with a particular focus on preparedness and recovery within both national and international contexts. And we are privileged to be able to provide this regionally focused degree with 2 residency sessions taking place in Doha, 1 in Oman and 2 in Washington, D.C. Today, we are fortunate to have with us Dr. Khalid Al Hashmi, the Dean of the School of Continuing Studies at Georgetown University, who has joined us for the launch of the EDM program. Dr. Al Hashmi oversees professional and graduate programs and liberal studies programs at the undergraduate, master's, and PhD levels. She also oversees the certificate and custom education programs. Before joining Georgetown in 2017, Dr. Al Hashmi served in academic dean roles at Northeastern University, the University of Pittsburgh, and the College of New Rochelle, and previously held positions in academic administration in New York University. She also taught each of these institutions in the fields of media studies and interdisciplinary research. Her expertise covers academic program development, design and management of technology-mediated education infrastructure, and workforce education. سعادة الدكتور محمد بن صالح السادة وزير الطاقة والصناعة، أصحاب السعادة السفراء، دكتورة كالي أوتر عميدة كلية الدراسات المستمرة بجامعة جورجتاون، الضيوف الكرام السيدات والسادة. يشرفني أن أرحب بكم في حفل تدشين برنامجنا الجديد لنيل الماجستير التنفيذي في إدارة الطوارئ والكوارث في منطقة الخليج. إن جمعنا اليوم يمثل نقطة فارقة في توسيع نطاق ما تقدمه جامعة جورجتاون من برامج أكاديمية ودعم تعليمي في دولة قطر. هذا ويشرفني كعميد لجامعة جورجتاون في قطر أن أشهد معكم ما نساهم به من جهود تفتح آفاقاً رحبة وتقدم العون والدعم للطلاب القطريين على وجه الخصوص والخليجيين عموماً، فضلاً إضافة لبرنامجنا لدرجة بكالوريوس العلوم في الشؤون الدولية. فبرنامجنا الذي نحن بصدد إطلاقه اليوم ودفعة الطلاب الجدد الحاضرين يمثل مجرد نقطة البداية في رحلتنا لتأسيس المزيد من البرامج في جامعة جورجتاون. ويعتبر تركيزنا اليوم على برنامج إدارة الطوارئ والكوارث ملائما من حيث التوقيت ومناسبا من حيث الظروف التي تمر بها المنطقة برمتها. لقد شهدنا جميعا زيادة مضطردة في أعداد الأزمات والكوارث التي يتعرض لها عالمنا اليوم، ولمسنا تصاعدا في حدتها، سواء كانت كوارث طبيعية أو من صنع الإنسان. ويزداد تأثير هذه الكوارث على مجتمعاتنا باضطراد لتصبح إحدى العقبات الرئيسية لمسارات التنمية المستدامة. ولهذا السبب فمن الضروري أن يكون لقاؤنا اليوم هنا هو لقاء لرفع الوعي وزيادة التعلم والتواصل والتعاون بأكبر قدر ممكن من الفعالية في مجال إدارة الطوارئ والكوارث. تواصل كلية الدراسات المستمرة بجامعة جورجتاون منح درجة علمية مميزة في مجال إدارة الطوارئ والكوارث في برنامج يتبع أسلوبا متطورا وشاملا لدراسة هذا المجال مع التركيز بوجه خاص على الاستعداد والتحسب للطوارئ والكوارث والتعافي من آثارها وتبعاتها بعد انقضائها، وذلك ضمن سياقين أحدهما وطني والآخر دولي. ويسرنا أن نتمكن من منح هذه الدرجة التي تركز على منطقة الخليج بالتحديد واستضافة 2 من إجمالي 5 وحدات دراسة ميدانية في الدوحة بدولة قطر، إضافة إلى أخرى في عمان و2 في واشنطن العاصمة. ومن دواعي سرورنا أن تشاركنا اليوم دكتورة كالي أوتر عميدة كلية الدراسات المستمرة بجامعة جورجتاون التي جاءت خصيصا للمشاركة في هذا الحدث المميز. تتولى الدكتورة أوتر الإشراف على برنامج الدراسات العليا والبرامج المهنية المتخصصة، إضافة إلى برامج الدراسات الإنسانية على المستويات الثلاثة البكالوريوس والماجستير والدكتوراه، فضلا عن توليها الإشراف على برامج التعليم الخاص والشهادات. قبيل التحاقها بجامعة جورجتاون عام 2017 تولت الدكتورة أوتر مناصب أخرى من بينها عميد الشؤون الأكاديمية بجامعة نورث إيسترن وجامعة بيتسبرغ وكلية نيوروشيل، كما شغلت سابقا عدة مناصب في الإدارة الأكاديمية بجامعة نيويورك، كما عملت بالتدريس في كل من تلك الجامعات في ميدان دراسات الأعلام والأبحاث متداخلة الاختصاصات. كما تتضمن خلفيتها العلمية تطوير برامج أكاديمية وتصميم وإدارة البنية التعليمية اعتمادا على التقنيات المتطورة وتعليم القوى العاملة. أود الآن أن أرحب بالعميدة كالي أوتر على المنصة. I would like now to welcome Dean Kelly Otter to the podium.
Your Excellency, Dr. Mohammed bin Saleh Al-Sada, Minister of Energy and Industry, Honorable Ambassadors, Dr. Ahmad Dalal, Dean of Georgetown University in Qatar, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you this morning. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to join our first cohort of the Middle East-focused Emergency and Disaster Management graduate program for a welcome dinner on Monday. It was a joy getting to know our students and chatting with you about your diverse backgrounds and experiences, and to learn about your very impressive credentials and professional roles. Today, we are in for what I am certain will be a wonderful keynote address by His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Al-Sada about leadership during crisis, a theme that will underscore your academic studies during your time in the program. Thank you, Your Excellency, for joining us today. We are also privileged to hear from our many distinguished panelists. Mr. Dominic Genetti, Vice President and Joint Interest Manager at ExxonMobil. Mr. John Galt, Country Emergency and Security Manager at Shell. And Mr. Khalid Al Hashmi, Assistant Undersecretary for Cybersecurity within the Ministry of Transport and Communications. Dr. Tim Frazier, Faculty Director for Georgetown's Emergency and Disaster Management Program. I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank Mr. Afan Al-Akazami, Managing Director for the International College of Engineering and Management, for his partnership and support in Oman. And finally, I want to recognize representatives from the GCC Emergency Management Center. Indeed, it was the EMC that started the conversation with Georgetown about a regional approach to disaster management 3 years ago. Thank you all for joining us today and for sharing with us your expertise. Before I welcome His Excellency Dr. Al-Sada, I'd like to say a few words about this truly special occasion and how much Georgetown values its ongoing partnership with our friends in the Middle East. We aspire to be a truly global university, and the School of Continuing Studies supports this goal by serving emerging and evolving needs in parts of the world far from our home in downtown Washington, D.C. As we wrestle with the collective challenges of disasters, both natural As we have witnessed and are witnessing firsthand in the United States in the wake of devastating hurricanes, and those that are man-made, we need to engage voices from other parts of the world. We enlist scholars and practitioners whose engagement with similar challenges produces powerful new ideas that can provide creative, imaginative, innovative solutions for our societies. From transportation and logistics to energy security, from business and commerce to health and medicine, emergency management practices affect all aspects of daily life. Through this program, students will learn from seasoned practitioners who have many years of experience working in the Middle East. They will also have the opportunity to collaborate with industry-leading corporations who are operating in the region and make valuable connections to further their professional growth. Case studies will focus on events more likely to occur in the Middle East. But make no mistake, you will be prepared to be an effective leader anywhere in the world that your career might lead you. Students, during your time at Georgetown, you should expect classwork to be rigorous. Your instructors will be both academic scholars and industry practitioners, and your classes will blend traditional research-based academics with the exploration and experience necessary to succeed in the field of emergency and disaster management. And through it all, these classes will draw from the Ignatian pedagogical values that make Georgetown education distinctive. You will be encouraged to reflect upon what you are learning and consider the ethical implications of your work. This is all in an effort to maximize your personal and professional growth, and I have no doubt that you will be able to witness this change in yourself. I, along with our partners who join us today, wish you the best as you proceed with your studies as the first cohort of the Emergency Disaster Management graduate program in the Middle East. And now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, His Excellency Dr. Mohammed bin Saleh Al-Sada. Dr. Al-Sada serves as Minister of Energy and Industry for the State of Qatar, and under the leadership and vision of His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the ministry has made great achievements in an astonishingly short time. The ministry has implemented a strategy to extract value from Qatar's natural resources and diversify income sources, including industrial development and manufacturing, while meeting its commitment as a signatory of the Kyoto Protocol. It is the goal of the Ministry of Energy and Industry to secure the country's prosperity through ultra-modern infrastructures capable of servicing and responding to the country's changing needs and future challenges. Dr. Al-Sada is uniquely suited to lead the ministry, given his 33 years of experience in the energy sector, including as chairman of the board and managing director for Qatar Petroleum. His Excellency is a member of the Supreme Council for Economic Affairs and Investment. In addition, he is the chairman of the Ras Gas Company Limited, Qatar Gas Transport Company Limited, and Qatar Electricity and Water Company. His Excellency is also the chairman of the Permanent Water Resources Committee at Qatar General Electricity and Water Corporation. He has served as a member of the Qatar Permanent Constitution Preparation Committee, the Supreme Education Council, and the National Committee for Human Rights. His Excellency is a member of the Qatar Foundation Board of Directors. In addition, he is the chairman of the Joint Advisory Board at Texas A&M University, Qatar, and the Board of Trustees at the College of North Atlantic, Qatar. Dr. Al-Sada received his PhD at the University of Manchester and his Bachelor of Science in Marine Science and Geology from Qatar University. Given Dr. Al-Sada's prestigious background and experience, he is uniquely suited to address the incoming cohort of emergency and disaster management graduate students regarding leadership during crisis. I would like to invite His Excellency, Dr. Al-Sada, to the podium to deliver the keynote address.
Your Excellencies, faculty and staff members of Georgetown University, Qatar, members of the inaugural cohort of the Emergency and Disaster Management Program distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning to you all. I wish to express my heartfelt thanks to the Georgetown University in Qatar for inviting me to share my thoughts at the launch of Emergency and Disaster Management Program at this prestigious institution. I'm happy to learn that this important subject has become an integral part of the programs offered by Georgetown University in Qatar. This program surely lends support to greater objective of Qatar's National Vision 2030 for achieving sustainable and secure development of the country as envisaged by His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of the State of Qatar. The relevance of such programs further increases in the context of the current unjust and illegal siege imposed on us by our neighboring countries. Qatar's response to the siege has been well recognized and perhaps evident to all of you. It talks volume of Qatar's preparedness to successfully counter such an unjust blockade, mitigating the crisis by activating our emergency programs and business continuity plans. Despite the blockade, we have not defaulted nor invoked force majeure clause on our delivery commitment of oil and gas, not missing even a single shipment to our customers. Ladies and gentlemen, from time immemorial, the world has faced different kinds of man-made emergency and disaster, which exposes the humanity to all kinds of risks, such as nuclear radiation caused by Chernobyl disaster, bubble gas tragedy, major oil spills, cyber attacks, water and air pollution, to name but a few. These risks are dynamic in nature and hence call for continuous development of new methodologies to combat and mitigate them. Besides such emergencies, the frequency of natural disasters is rising, originating from hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes, excessive flooding, droughts, etc. The devastating caused by hurricanes Harvey and Irma are very fresh in our minds. These disasters have far-reaching, widespread, and adverse impact. The need to combat these disasters and preserve the safety, security, and prosperity of our society is becoming all the more important, complex, and challenging with time. The assessment of the risks, ladies and gentlemen, of perceived events and adequate preparedness to mitigate such risks is really the essence of emergency and disaster management. Talking of preparedness, I'd like to recall Benjamin Franklin's famous quote: "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to failure." Unquote. Preparedness is needed to all levels and every walk of life, because, and be it in the government, private sector, or community at large. It is important to build resilience and security of any nation or region. Such emergency and disaster management preparedness programs should encourage critical thinking and strategic leadership skills. It can be imparted to students, participants, business and government executives alike. Though various modes include exposing them to dynamic classroom projects which simulate current and emerging real-world threats. The subject is very vast and of paramount importance. It has relevance to every walk of life. Here, I will try to focus on its significance to the energy and industry sector. As you know, ladies and gentlemen, energy is an indispensable input in the growth of any nation. Qatar's energy resources, particularly our natural gas and oil on one hand, electricity and water on the other, are the prime drivers of our nation's economy and social wealth. It is essential that we ensure utilization of our prime resources, their production and delivery to the customers in Qatar and beyond our borders in a safe, secure, and reliable manner. We often hear in corporate and government circles that we must make emergency preparedness a top priority. I believe that a commitment to emergency management must run much deeper than simply being a priority. It must be a value, a core value, that shapes decision-making and at all times at every level of government and corporate sector. The solution is not limited to developing manuals and instituting standards and procedures, but in creating a culture that shapes our mindset, attitude, and behavior. The state of Qatar takes emergency and disaster management very seriously and has continuously encouraged its flagship organizations like Qatar Petroleum, QEWC, and Kahrama to take initiatives and institute measures for enhancing Qatar's preparedness in this respect. The job is mammoth. Jurisdiction of Qatar's energy sector expand beyond its onshore energy facilities to cover vast offshore areas, including about 6,000 square kilometers of North Field, the largest single natural gas field in the world. It is pivotal to install emergency and disaster management systems to safeguard all our energy and industry assets spread across Dukhan, Ras Laffan, Misaid, and offshore. These include multiple platforms, offshore stations, world-scale gas processing plants, refineries, fertilizers and chemical plants, oil and gas pipelines, storage facilities, port facilities and jetties, power generation plants, water and desalination plants, etc. These operational areas are critical to our economic health and well-being. We have not only to safeguard these assets, but to proactively be ready for any kind of emergency, be it fire, gas leakage, or pollutions such as oil spills. Through the flagship organizations, we have instituted online emergency response systems and contingency plans in order to adequately respond to different emergencies, while our policy remains prevention is better than cure. Often emergencies and disasters in energy industry do not recognize borders. They call for a coordinated and comprehensive joint response of all those in their wide sphere of influence. In line with this, Qatar actively engages with the regional and international organizations which deal with environmental disasters and pollution controls, such as Marine Emergency Mutual Aid Center, Regional Organization for the Protection of Marine Environment, and many others. Other very important dimension of our environmental protection management is the emergency response plan. Qatar's specific response plans for all the oil and gas operations and industrial areas are instituted to cover different scenarios of emergencies and are designed to protect people, assets, and the environment. Emergency and disaster management goes hand in hand with environment protection. In this respect, we have taken all-round initiatives. It is an ongoing process. Some major initiatives include the $1 billion jetty boil-off gas recovery project, Al Shaheen Field Flare Gas Recovery Project, the Saeed Carbon Dioxide Recovery Project, and the ongoing flare minimization programs. At this point, I must emphasize that all measures we take are only one part of the equation. While preparedness is the essential prerequisite of emergency and disaster management, even the best safety systems are not fully effective unless they exist as part of a broader culture of any organization. Developing a culture of preparedness, ladies and gentlemen, is a journey rather than a destination. It is both science and art. To get where we need to be, continuous improvement is essential, as the variety and complexity of hazards are ever increasing. We support and encourage formal education and training to help organizations develop agility and preparedness towards emergency. To address its complexity, as a specialized subject needs inclusion of simulation and research activities. I'm glad to know that the curriculum of Georgetown University does indeed include these activities. I would like to emphasize that leadership of any organization plays a major role in this process. They have to instill the values of a preparedness and the flexibility to strive to create a working environment in which understanding risks and fostering preparedness are internalized, reinforced, and rewarded. Leadership drives behavior, and behavior establish culture. I'm pleased to learn that Georgetown University, as a leading institution in the field of higher education for emergency and disaster management, has customized this program that suits our region. You can take full advantage of this wonderful opportunity provided by your university in developing new ideas and approaches which will go a long way in building the resilience to respond to emergency and disaster situations in a more effective manner. Before I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to congratulate you participants who have enrolled as the very first cohort of this program. It is really a privilege to embark on this journey with Georgetown University in Qatar. Let me assure you once again that the expertise you will acquire here will be of a great value in the progress of Qatar and the region. I wish you all the best and thank you.
Ahlan wa sahlan bikum. Welcome once again. My name is Gad Noneman. The only reason I'm here, I suppose, is because I used to be dean in this university, which was a real honor, and I was in on the very early discussions on enabling this kind of program to emerge. So it's a real pleasure to see this come to fruition. I have absolutely no credit in the matter, but I'll be happy to take it anyway. But it's a real pleasure also because this is a subject of obvious importance to anyone living in a place like Qatar today, but anyone who's ever been involved in running any sort of significant organization. As a former dean, and I know that we here, like in other universities, had to deal with emergency planning and preparedness, and it's something that's an ongoing project. One can never cease to think about it. As Dr. Al-Sada just explained, this is a matter of culture in which one's never good enough. So I look forward very much to learning from this stellar panel that we have here with us today, particularly because it's not just a question that one can never learn enough. It's also, as we've already got an indication of, there's so many moving parts to this. It's such a complex area, and all of these different parts intersect. And in addition to that, one never quite knows what's going to happen. It's all very well to prepare for particular things one can think might be coming one's way, but in essence, one never quite knows. There are plenty of unknown unknowns as well as known unknowns, et cetera, to coin a phrase. And at the moment, being here in Qatar, of course, it's particularly appropriate to think about all these things, because it's not just, as we heard, human and natural disasters that come our way. It's also man-made and indeed politics-made disasters and emergencies that come our way. Connecting what I've just said with this, the event, the boycott in Qatar, was completely out of the blue. So how does one prepare for that? And of course, a general culture of preparedness is part of the answer. And I have to say, as one of many observers, I was amazed. I was really impressed, amazed, in fact, by the extent to which Qatar clearly had been preparing. The leadership had been preparing even for the unexpected. Otherwise, they never would have been able to respond in the way that they have. So, on that note, let me briefly reintroduce our panel. We have Mr. Dominic Genetti, who's in this position, who's Vice President and Joint Industry Manager at ExxonMobil. John Galt, who is the Country Emergency and Security Manager at Shell. Engineer Khalid Al Hashmi, who is the Assistant Undersecretary for Cybersecurity at the Ministry of Transport and Communications. And of course, Dr. Tim Frazier, who is the Faculty Director of the EDM, the Emergency and Disaster Management Program at Georgetown University. I'll tell you a little bit about each of them. Dominic, of course, is at ExxonMobil and has been with Exxon for a long time. He's responsible really for all of ExxonMobil's interests in the LNG operating businesses associated with Qatar. That's to say, RasGas, Qatar Gas, and the 3 gasification terminals in Italy, the UK, and the USA. And he's also the general manager for Al Khalij Gas, which provides natural gas for the Qatari market. He's a trained chemical engineer, and he's been working with ExxonMobil since 1999. Before starting his current job this year here in Qatar, based in Qatar, he was senior upstream advisor to ExxonMobil. Across to my notes on John. He's, as I say, the country emergency and security manager for Shell. He's also a decorated British military officer who saw deployment in Europe, as well as in Latvia and Angola, and of course also in the UK. He was also for a while British defense attaché to Angola. He since focused on crisis and risk management activities, and he's worked with companies including Lloyd's of London, Texaco, BHP, the Qatar Financial Center, and of course Qatar Petroleum. And he's in those kinds of roles he worked in Mexico, Afghanistan, South America, Africa, and the Middle East. So as the title of his role suggests, he is now in charge of Qatar Shell emergency response. He's responsible for response operations at the Pearl gas to liquids plant in Ras Laffan, which is the world's largest gas to liquids facility. John was educated at the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology, well known as UMIST, where he obtained a master's in management sciences. Engineer Khalid Al Hashmi is the Assistant Secretary, Undersecretary for Cybersecurity at the Ministry of Transport and Communications, and he's more than 20 years' experience in the field of information technology, with particular expertise in cybersecurity, in information infrastructure and ICT systems planning. He is specifically the Undersecretary for Cybersecurity, so-called QCERT, the program that secures or safeguards the country's information and communications systems. His organization addresses cybersecurity risks, obviously protects sensitive information, and ensures the safety of children on the internet. He was also instrumental in the development of the national strategy for cybersecurity. Interestingly, given current events, he played a central role in the establishment of the GCC's CERT committee, or Cyber Security Committee, and in fact he was the chairman of that committee for the first year. Prior to joining the ministry, Khalid worked as the IT Operation and Support Security Executive Manager for the 2006 Asian Games in Doha. Khalid was also an active member of the Qatari Armed Forces, where he retired at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Khalid was educated, amongst other places, at the University of Michigan, where he obtained his Master of Science in Software Engineering. And then finally, last but not least, Dr. Frazier, Tim Frazier, who is the Faculty Director of the Emergency and Disaster Management Program. He's also Director of the Hazards and Climate Impacts Research Center. He's got a PhD in geography from Pennsylvania State University, and he specialized in the research on the vulnerability and resilience of marginalized populations to climate change and natural hazards. And in that context, those of you who followed some of the reporting on the events in the United States will know that he's been on the media quite a lot and commenting on this, but more importantly, he's been involved in advising government organizations in responding to these events. So it's quite extraordinary we've been able to get him over here for this. He is particularly viewed as a coastal hazards expert, and he's a leading researcher, internationally recognized, on the impacts of the sea level rise on the physical and socioeconomic vulnerability and resilience of the communities living in those areas. He's, as all of this suggests, an expert in hazard mitigation planning and climate change adaptation. So that's far more than enough as an introduction. So what I'd like to do is invite each of the speakers initially to give you a brief set of reflections on both the generic field of emergency and disaster management, the kind of lessons that they've learned, but also link that to their own personal experience and their personal organizations. And then afterwards we'll have a little discussion, a few exchanges before opening it up to all of you. So if I could ask perhaps, since we're sitting in this order, Dominic to start first.
Sure. Your Excellency, Dr. Mohammed bin Saleh Al-Sada, Minister of Energy and Industry, and Dean Otter and Dean Galt, as well as Dr. Donovan and fellow panelists, faculty and students. I'm honored to speak to you today on behalf of ExxonMobil at this distinguished gathering. As Your Excellency, as His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Al-Sada mentioned earlier, energy is an indispensable industry. It fuels development and human progress around the world. Our industry impacts everyone on the planet every single day. In short, the world relies on the energy industry. Key to being a reliable provider of energy requires two things. Number one, preventing avoidable serious incidents. And then number two, mitigating the consequences when a serious incident or disruption does occur. Recent events such as the political crisis in the GCC and natural disasters that have been mentioned in the Texas Gulf Coast and most recently in Mexico City remind us of the potential disruptions outside of our direct control. And then serious incidents like the Macondo spill in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010 and the ExxonMobil Valdez oil spill in 1990 are reminders of the impact of industry-related incidents. In fact, the Valdez incident had a profound impact on the company I work for, ExxonMobil. Following Valdez, ExxonMobil transformed the way that we manage risk by developing a comprehensive system that we call Operations Integrity Management System, or called OIMS in short. As you can see behind me, it is a thorough system of administrative and physical barriers designed to prevent serious incidents. And in the unfortunate event that there is a serious event or emergency, to be prepared to mitigate the negative consequences. As you can see, the core of the OIMS is a framework of 11 elements that are implemented by each business unit around the world in a systematic and comprehensive way. However, OIMS can be summarized into three broadly applicable principles. First, as His Excellency Mohammed bin Al-Sada mentioned, is strong leadership. In other words, set clear expectations, ensure accountability, learn from incidents when they do happen, and continuously improve. Number two is to identify and manage all key risks. These risks can arise from facility design and construction, the operations of our facilities, a variety of human factors, changing conditions, and third-party services and contractors. In other words, to the extent possible, identify the possible risks and eliminate the serious consequences. And then number three, be prepared to respond to incidents to mitigate the consequences. When an incident does happen, minimize the impact to our employees and contractors, to the community, and to our business. Related to these principles, of course, is the principle of having a very robust business continuity plan. Just to share a few practical examples of what this OIMS framework does for us. It enables the safe operation of facilities, as well as the safe shutdown and startup during emergency situations. It ensures that the corporation is prepared to deal with any emergency situation while maintaining business continuity by developing and repeatedly practicing scenario-based emergency response drills. It also ensures that we never become complacent by establishing an expectation of continuous improvement and regular internal and external evaluations to ensure that all the elements are robust and effective. The recent Hurricane Harvey and the subsequent tropical storm that hit the Texas Gulf Coast serve to illustrate how this OIMS framework works in a real-life situation. Some of you know that Qatar Petroleum and ExxonMobil have joint interest in the Golden Pass LNG terminal, which is located in Sabine, Texas. It was in the direct path of Hurricane Harvey. As the storm approached, safe shutdown procedures were implemented, and the plant was evacuated with the exception of a few critical personnel. The LNG facility was designed to withstand hurricanes. However, Harvey was a very strong test of the design of the Golden Pass facilities. The winds were extremely heavy. Part of the plant and related pipeline stations were flooded. Fortunately, no one was injured during the storm, and due to good design and preparedness before the storm, damage was very minimal. During the recovery, business continuity plans that were tested many times during routine exercises have proven very effective. In conclusion, I would like to recognize that the state of Qatar's response to the GCC political crisis serves as an excellent example of successful management of an unexpected disruption. And speaking on behalf of ExxonMobil, I would like to commend the government for its success in supporting the energy industry in Qatar in maintaining reliable supply to our customers around the world. ExxonMobil is committed to working within our industry and with governments to share our best practices. This is true for our work in the state of Qatar and in the valued partnerships that we have established here. The success of our work and our projects in Qatar are the result really of two main things. Number one, the wise leadership and progressive vision that has been created in the country and the partnerships that we've created and jointly nurtured. Through vigilance, discipline, humility, and working with our partners, we can effectively manage the key risks to our industry. And when, unfortunately, unexpected events do occur, we can manage them and grow stronger in the aftermath. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to a very robust discussion with the panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, and we can follow up in a few minutes amongst all of us. But if I could now ask Dominic to start, John, sorry, to speak to us.
Thank you. His Excellency, Deans, faculty members, I thought I would take my talk away from oil and gas, because I thought Dominic would do that, and I would have a look at one type of crisis resolution. It's not in my present role, but I used to work as a negotiator with Lloyd's of London, the insurance market, who would provide special insurance. So if you were kidnapped and you were on the policy, you would send someone like me to come and resolve the issue. But first, what is a crisis? A crisis could be an unexpected incident which will stop normal operations. Now, it could be something like you could forget your loved one's birthday, or perhaps Harvey is coming through. But at the end of the day, as a crisis leader, I would suggest you're looking for 3 items. First of all, you have to have a well thought out plan. Secondly, you have to identify what resources you need to resolve that particular issue, and more importantly, how and when you're going to deploy those resources. And the third thing is, what does normal look like at the end of the day? So Harvey, certainly within a Shell context, we identified that the floating lit roofs of our tanks were not able to withstand the deluge of water. So that was the only incident that we had from Harvey. We had to put some product out of our tanks. So going forward, we'll be looking at a redesign of some of our tanks. So let me take you back to in a previous role. So in the background, you can see Table Mountain. This is the golf course, and that's where I got the call from my underwriter that said one of the insured has been kidnapped and wanted me on a plane. So it took me from Cape Town into London, where I had a briefing. And that's where we started making the plan. From London into Caracas. Nope, we're still in Caracas. Anyone able to help? Thank you. Oh, there we are. So the aim was to end at a small city called San Cristobal, which sits right between the border of Venezuela and Colombia. As you can see, there was no business class available because it was closed, so it was standing room only. That was only the leg from Caracas into San Cristobal. As you can see, I didn't fly Qatar Airways. This is the city, known for its farming and sometimes its exotic crops. And just in the background there is also some emerald mines. This is the reason that that one of the family members was kidnapped. They were kidnapped from the front of their own villa. There was supposed to be security in front to stop that. Welcome to Pepe. He was supposed to prevent anything happening like that. However, he was coerced to take a comfort break when the family member was coming in, and that's where the kidnap happened. So they thought they were in a safety zone. However, it didn't happen. When I got there, I sat with the family, and then we start to make the plan. The idea is to negotiate the release. There are many ways. The kidnappers have decided that we would use an advertisement to start the negotiation process. So we were asked to buy a car. I've seen cases where we've asked to sell a dog, sell a house, or it is a telephone call that comes generally at 2 o'clock in the morning, so that the family are off balance. One of the questions that we always have to make sure is we have to prove proof of life. And looking at the audience, some of you are old enough to have seen a movie called Proof of Life. It was released before iPhone 1 was available. Russell Crowe was in the lead. It was based in Colombia, and it goes through this particular negotiation process. It's worthwhile having a look at it. I was one of the consultants on the film. That's why I don't get my royalty. So at the end of the day, the easiest kidnap is for monetary gain. If you are starting to go through the political problems, that can take a long, long time. This one was just a question of how much were they going to have to pay to release the individual. That's quite a stack of money, but it ended up in 2 large carry-ons. The release time, the date, the location is agreed, and then, behold, the family member is released. Any idea which member was actually kidnapped? It was the young man on the white shirt. Just look at the eyes. That's the end of my presentation. Just a thought. If you are a leader, history will judge you on the first 24 hours of your response to that crisis. Other than that, thank you very much.
So, Khalid, you prefer, I think, to engage directly with the audience, not standing behind the lectern. Go ahead.
I need someone to help me with the... I can تجاوب بيطلع بدري. يا سلمان عندك الوقت ها؟ زرق لي دقيقتين إذا شفتني اشتقيت. هم عطوني 7 دقائق. Good. We'll go to the first slide. Sa'at al-Wazir, Your Excellency, distinguished guest, fellow speakers. Is it clear, my voice? Good, excellent. So I will try to continue from the 2 excellent presentations, continuity, to make sure we continue with the interesting approach of my previous speakers. I'm going to ask questions because I like to engage the audience. First question is going to be, how many students we have in this auditorium? Raise your hands, please. Excellent. Salman, ما سجلت? Okay. How many professors? Professors, wow, you're a professor. Good. Practitioners? Excellent. How many of you exercise? Daily exercise. Okay, daily. Why do we exercise? To improve the resiliency of our immune system, to continue doing our jobs on a daily basis. Why we take vitamin supplements and stay on a healthy diet? Why? To stand over here and speak to you. Continue doing business. I will speak on business continuity. I think my previous colleagues also, they stressed on continuity. I'm going to focus on technology mostly because my domain is technology. The first slide is about business continuity simplified. We are in the academic institution. The objective of academic institutions is to simplify solutions to the real world. And I'll try to simplify things. That's why I asked the first question. I always try to map real-life scenarios to what you read in the textbook. It will become easier. It will make things easier for you. I do that, trust me, every day. When I read something, when I listen to a new information, when I watch the news, I think, how can I map this to what I do on a daily basis? And then things become very simpler. So let's take an example of an energy plant. I will follow the lead of His Excellency. We'll take an example of an energy plant that produces power. Okay? So in Doha we have probably some of them. Those energy plants, they rely on several sources to continue providing services. One of them is technology. True? Come on, guys. Still, we haven't had lunch. So yes, technology is one of the sources. Those energy plants rely to providing services. In case of if there is a disruption in this technology source, how the energy plant will continue doing business. Because energy plants, they rely on ICS, industry control systems, SCADA applications, and if there is a disruption in one of the SCADA applications, an ICS system, there is a failure. And then you need to resume business immediately. So there are some practices, procedures, processes you need to adopt and resume conducting business immediately. Next slide, please. Disaster timeline. You see the red, the yellow, and the green. The only difference between the three is the response when it comes to responding to a disruption. If you work in a company or in a government agency or in any energy utility plant, do you have a response team? Yes? Okay, good. Good answer. Maybe I'll accept that answer. So you have a response team. The objective of the response team is to immediately engage and contain that disruption. Their role is to contain the disruption, ensure continuity of that process or the system which was disrupted, and then move into the yellow, which is the business continuity. Sometimes business continuity process takes a day or an hour or 1 minute or probably weeks and months. It depends basically on the magnitude of the incident. Then you have the green, which is the recovery. Let me ask you one more question. I'm going to continue asking questions. What comes first, business continuity or disaster recovery? Students? Huh? Business management, which is business continuity, comes before disaster recovery. Good answer. Why? Next slide. The answer is the next slide. Oops. Okay. So what is business continuity? Again, simplified. Why we do why we adopt business continuity management? The answer is over there, because I'm going to ask you other questions after this slide. So read this, and then we're going to do an exercise with all of you. Read this. It's very simple. We do business continuity management to plan, implement, monitor, periodic monitors, okay, to ensure the process and systems that are running our business continue doing exactly the same in case if there's a disaster, natural, man-made, or technology. Next slide. So let's do an exercise. This is Georgetown. Do we understand our business in Georgetown? What is Georgetown service to the community? What do we provide? Education. So we understand our business. Excellent. Do we have a BCM strategy in Georgetown? Yes? Yes, sir? Yes, ma'am? Good. Developing the responses. So, do you have procedures and processes which are continuously refined? Okay, good. I'm asking you because you're the dean, it seems, over here. You're the boss. Establishing the continuity culture. What is the continuity culture? And how do we establish this culture? Through education. One of the challenges in my line of business, I've been working in this field, again with my colleagues here and with my colleagues also in the audience. One of the challenges we face in this region, in Qatar, is the culture. There is a culture always shocked. Whenever we introduce something new, there is resistance, there is reluctance to adopt this. Sometimes because of anxiety that this will take over what we are doing in a traditional manner. But how do you, let's say, mitigate this culture challenge? Again, through education. Education starting from primary. I learned lots of things from my kids. And I'll tell you a funny story. I had a kid who was 8 years old, and he uses passwords to access his digital devices. And I thought he was using a very simple password. His mom's name, someone, he knows, his probably, siblings. And I was trying to crack this guy's password. It took me 3 hours. I couldn't, and I'm a cybersecurity guy. I wasn't able to crack his password. Guess what? Because education, they had challenge, I think the teacher taught them the importance of password and why they have to have this digital key to protect their digital assets, especially from parents snooping into their... And I asked him the question, how come your password is so strong? He said, then he told me about a game they did, where they basically, played in school with the teacher about how to manage strong password. Culture. This is very important, by the way. And really, Georgetown, thank you. And Your Excellency, thank you for sponsoring this. Culture, education is a key. Of course, fifth is the exercising, planning, and maintenance. That's the fifth element, which is you have to continue do these exercises. Assess, evaluate your procedures and processes. Business continues to change. Technology continues to change. Your processes still remains the same. Because again, why? The anxiety of change. You don't want to adopt new things, you continue with the old processes. Assessments and evaluations will help you to refine your processes and to continue with the evolution of technology and business. Or business will outsource you guys. I think, are we on time much? خلص الوقت؟ زربت دقيقتين. So, you can Google this, top 10 threats and disruptions, courtesy DC Horizon Scout reporting. The first, of course, the first were the cyber attacks. You can see that because we suffered some cyber attacks in the past in Doha. However, we had a good continuity plan. The recovery was rapid. Next slide. Real-life case studies. Supply chain, I think His Excellency the Minister stressed upon the supply chain during what we are facing here in Doha and how we were able to basically overcome all the challenges put upon us by the blockade countries. Last one. Benefits of VCN, which you will learn when you take this course. Thank you. My time is up. Thank you.
So finally, we've got Dr. Tim.
It's always dangerous to give a professor the floor when time is limited. I'm cognizant of the limited time. It doesn't mean I'm going to follow that. I just understand it. I know time is limited. So I didn't prepare slides. I didn't come up with a list of questions for our students. The main thing I wanted to say was Just a great appreciation for His Excellency and our distinguished guests, and many of the colleagues in the room that have helped us put our program together and get us to where we are today, which is the reason that we have the launch ceremony is because we put together this program. I also want to thank my students, those that were brave enough to take a program with me and know that it's not going to be fun, but it's going to be rewarding on the back end. Obviously, we're going to push you very hard. That's what we do at Georgetown. If we don't push you hard, then we've failed you. And trust me, we're not going to fail you. So we're going to push you very hard. I do want to just sort of say a couple of things about emergency management and disaster management in general. It's an increasingly complex field. And I think many of our students, when they started our program a few weeks ago, did not have a complete understanding about the range of the field. They did not really fully understand that it's not just about where do you put the fire truck and what's the best time that you have in terms of response. What's a good response time when you're responding to an incident? So, as Dean Otter suggested or stated when she gave her talk, we're more than just response. Our program is preparedness, response, and recovery, and we practice all three aspects of emergency disaster management at Georgetown. So the reason that's important is because response is only one sort of portion of that. And if we have good response, that's great. But what I've asked my students all week is, what's the best level of response we can have? No response, right? No response. And the reason we have no response is we don't have a need to respond. We've prepared in a way that minimizes our need to respond. That's emergency management. We aren't interested in managing the emergency. We're interested in preventing the emergency. That's our goal. I've been asked by a lot of media outlets, as was suggested over the last few weeks, my thoughts on various issues, prompted, of course, by the recent hurricanes that we had in the United States. And one thing that I was asked was that I thought was one of the most ridiculous questions that I've ever been asked. But I answered it. I was representing myself in Georgetown, and I didn't want to embarrass myself or my fine institution. So I answered the question, even though I thought it was ridiculous. So when Harvey was approaching Houston, and then Harvey moved through Houston, and we saw the consequence of flooding in Houston, one journalist asked me, why didn't they just evacuate the city? It's 6.5 million people, right? And they had about a 2-day warning. And I don't care how many roads you have in Qatar, you guys have marvelous new roads. We've been driving around on them all week. They're fabulous. You're not going to move 6.5 million people in 2 days. It's just not going to happen. So that's a fallacy. So there's some things that the general public doesn't really know about emergency management. We create an environment in the way that we do business daily, the way that we do development daily, and then we have the expectation that the emergency manager is going to be able to manage that situation or that environment, should there be a need for that management to occur. Well, we're not moving 6.5 million people in Houston. One of the other aspects of Harvey when it hit Houston was massive flooding. So one of the things that contributed to the flooding in Houston was unchecked development, was urban development in a way that didn't facilitate resilience for the community. So we build in a way, and then when a disaster hits or an event hits, it becomes a disaster. And so we're not really forward thinking when we do development. So I always tell my students, you better be best friends with the urban planner in your community. That's the best way to ensure that you don't have to have a plan for a big response. But sometimes we don't do things the right way. We're pretty famous for that in the U.S., and I apologize to my international colleagues about that. But we don't always do things the right way, and then we're forced to respond. And fortunately, we have a high capacity to respond. But one of the primary definitions that's used a lot for disasters is when it's an event that overcomes your ability to respond. So then what do you do? And we've heard conversation about, well, we have to have a plan. You have to have a plan, you have to have a plan. Well, you do have to have a plan. And trust me, I encourage everyone to put a plan together. Do a lot of work in hazard mitigation planning and planning. And the question I always ask people when they come in and ask me to talk about their community, they ask me to talk about community resilience, they ask me to talk about vulnerability, they ask me to talk about what can we do, what should we do, and they're always proud of the fact that they have a plan. And I ask them, the first question I ask them is, how do you know your plan is good? we have one, therefore it's good. No, it's not, just because you have one. We learned a lot of lessons in the U.S. over time in terms of emergency disaster management. Unfortunately, we keep getting to practice. We keep getting the opportunity to get better, to refine our plan. And even though we've refined our plan over many disasters, in recent years especially, our plan is still inadequate. So we always are striving to do a better job. When you're done, it's over. Well, unfortunately, you're never done. So just sort of a couple of events that I want to point out. So I don't know if you've ever got to see any of the early civil defense commercials and signage that we had in the U.S. in the late 40s and 50s. And the primary ad campaign was duck and cover, right? That was our plan for nuclear attack, duck and cover. And we were basically telling our students, if you get under the desk when the nuclear explosion happens, you're going to be okay. No, I don't think that's a good plan. But that was the plan we had. So we followed that plan, we practiced that, we drilled it, and there's a lot of paraphernalia and imagery out there about that that's successful. Well, not a good plan. Hurricane Andrew hits the U.S. and hits Florida in the 90s, and we think we have a good plan in place for Andrew. We didn't officially have a hazard mitigation plan, but we had some plans in place. And one thing that I like to show my students, one image that I show, and I apologize for not having that today, is two subdivision developments side by side. And the picture is after Hurricane Andrew's come through. And one development is leveled, and the other one is relatively intact with just a few damages. And I always ask my student, which development do you think was built earlier and which development was built later? And they always say the later development is the one that's still standing. Obviously, we learned. We did a better job with development. We ensured that we would maintain our house and our roof in the storm. But just the opposite is true. The older development was better because they had stronger building codes. And we understood that we needed strong building codes in a place like Florida that was subjected to natural hazards like hurricanes. Well, we changed the way we did development, and we built with less stringent building codes because we wanted to facilitate economic growth and economic development. Money was driving the decision to alter those building codes. And what we saw from that was as a consequence was total devastation of those homes. So sometimes we try to make a decision that we think is really good, and it comes out being bad. The other sort of example I give, and I'll cut short because I know we're short on time, the last example I give is one of the most successful ad campaigns in the history of the United States. And that is Smokey the Bear, or Smokey Bear. He really doesn't have a middle name, even though everyone calls him the Bear. He's really just Smokey Bear. And do you know what Smokey Bear is? Anyone? Yeah. So Smokey Bear was the ad campaign that the Forest Service used and the U.S. used to sort of try to do its best to make sure that we didn't have forest fires. We really didn't want forest fires burning, and so the whole ad campaign was around only you can prevent forest fires. That's what Smokey Bear would always say. Put out your fire when you go camping. Don't be careless with your fire. We don't want to start a forest fire. Well, before Smokey Bear, whenever we had a fire in the western states of the U.S., often those fires could be put out with shovels, and you saw the firefighters had a sack, and they would slap the ground with their sack to put the fire out. And the ad campaign was so successful that what's happened is that we haven't had a lot of forest fires over a course of a lot of years, and so what we saw was a generation of fuel load on the ground. So a lot of debris and trees that would fall, and so we had a lot of stuff on the ground that would burn really easily, and it would create these huge fires. So because we were so good at keeping the fire from starting, now when we have a fire, we have to put those out with bombers instead of shovels. So sometimes we can do things that we think is good, but ultimately it's not. And the last thing I'll say about emergency disaster management is there's an equation that we use in our discipline in our field. And that equation is risk perception drives risk tolerance drives mitigation. And what we mean by that is if you have a high perception of risk in your community, if you know it's risky, we've done a good job with risk assessment, we know there's a risk in our community, then your risk tolerance is going to be really low. And you're not going to want to be in that community without doing some sort of mitigation. So that's great. Unfortunately, what we see in our field is a lot of people don't have the appropriate level of risk perception for the potential event. And when your risk perception is really low, your risk tolerance is really high, and it's very difficult to do mitigation. And so when we see that equation, and we see that equation inappropriately or not sufficiently applied, then it makes our job as emergency managers much more difficult. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to come to speak to you. It's an honor for our students to participate in the event as well. And trust me, we're going to hammer them and hammer them and hammer them so that there will be better emergency, crisis, and disaster managements for their communities. Thank you.
I'm also aware of the time constraint, and I know this is quite likely to be interesting questions and observations from the floor. So maybe I can just ask the participants, if the panelists, if they would like to, if they care to reflect very briefly on a couple of things. One is any particular incident or situation or environmental factor related to Qatar that triggers ideas about emergency and disaster management that might be generalizable, or where you had a particular reaction. So if there's something like that related to Qatar, that'd be interesting. And the other one, this might be related, is what does one do about the situation, or how does one prepare for situations that are not foreseeable? In other words, when things come completely out of the blue, if it's not related to climate patterns and weather patterns that might be worsening, with spikes, but nevertheless, there is sort of a general area of preparedness one can start to plan around, bring the right expertise in. How do companies, government organizations, any other institutions prepare for the things that you really can't know? Is that something that has occurred in your experience, and what's the general thinking about that?
I'll start with you. Your first question was, what are our biggest, I guess, risk factors that we're worried about in our industry in Qatar? For us, from a business perspective, our biggest risk factor is always reliability of our operating facilities. Because if you look at the scale of the LNG and flowing gas operations in Ras Laffan City, it's enormous. And the consequences of not supplying domestically or to our international partners is very big. So reliability is a big risk factor. And I think going back to the cybersecurity discussion, ExxonMobil is very concerned within our own operations around the world around cybersecurity. We know we're being attacked every single day. The threat is real. There's been attacks in the U.S., there's been attacks to Qatar. It's very real. So we're working very hard within our own company and also with our partners in Qatar to have the most robust controls around preventing cyber attacks or mitigating the consequences of cyber attacks.
With His Excellency in the audience, I would like to say that Pearl GTL is very safe and continuing operations. But what we do is we do have a lot of exercises to test our procedures and processes. And if you are a crisis leader, you should be aiming at that. We did a recent Tier 3, if you understand the Tier 3, so that's the statewide emergency for a simulated well blowout at Pearl GTL on the offshore platforms. State agencies, Qatar Petroleum was there. We formed a unified command, and that I would exhort people, if you are in that position, make sure you do exercise your plan. Coming to your point, do you have a plan? Yes. Is it exercised? Possibly not.
I'll answer the second part, which is how do you predict risk, I think, in the future. Again, I will share with you my local experience and, let's say, regional. Risk management is the key at a corporate level. but risk management with your business unit, not in isolation of the business unit. I've seen lots of risk management frameworks and projects, however, not consulted with the business unit. So for example, if you're working on a risk management framework or a project, please include every single department in your corporation. HR is important, legal is important, finance is important, because they will share with you the risk they will anticipate basically in the processes and the future development. That's number one. Number two, I also stress upon the continuous evaluation and testing. I would like to share with you this also information. Some of you are aware, some of you did participate also. Qatar was the first in MENA to launch cybersecurity exercises, a national cybersecurity exercise. We started in 2013, and we continue to do it every year with every single organization in Doha, starting from the oil and gas, finance, government organizations, private sector, and it's a continuous exercise. Again, it's about basically assessing the procedures, the process to make sure that they're resilient enough to sustain any risk in the future.
I suppose one follow-up question to that is, one of the reasons, one of the instances that I thought of was the hack of Qatar News Agency. I don't think anybody had foreseen that, and it had huge impact. So this is one instance, I guess, where people suddenly are faced with an attack or an event or a crisis that they hadn't planned for. I mean, the response was very efficient. There could be other such things. Is there a kind of rule of thumb, and Tim, you can of course come in on this as well, is there a rule of thumb, or isn't there, whereby organizations think about those sorts of scenarios, even if they can't predict it, or is it just react as appropriate in the moment?
Do you need a diplomatic answer or a realistic?
This is Georgetown University.
I'm not a politician. I'm not a politician. But I will tell you, again, I will speak basically what we do in Qatar and the region, and this applies to everywhere I go also. I see there is lots of focus on technology. We always neglect the human and the process element, always. I've seen this in the US, I've seen this in Japan, I've seen this to everywhere I visit. Technology, we assume technology is the key to resolve our issues. Qatar, or Q&A, they relied on technology. And they were doing a good job relying on technology, anticipating the technology risk. Yes, the response was rapid. My team with other agencies were on the ground 15 minutes after the call, which was only the driving distance. The containment was also very effective. However, it was, if we adopted certain procedures, basically, we could have prevented all this. Those procedures were dependent on the human and the process element, which we try again, to impose through policies and standards. Education is a key over here. No matter how many policies and standards and laws you will impose or enforce or endorse, if there is no education associated with this process, it's going to be a failure.
I want to sort of chime in on the first two questions, if I can remember them. So, an event relative or related to the crisis here, I just want to sort of back up a bit and say, when we think about vulnerability, we have a very simple definition that we use in our discipline, and the definition that we predominantly use is potential for loss. And so if you think about potential for loss, who in the world doesn't have potential for loss? Whether that's an individual, community, an agency, it doesn't matter. Everyone has that potential for loss. But there are people around the world and agencies and communities around the world that are differentially vulnerable. They have a different level of vulnerability. And so when we talk about different levels of vulnerability, one of the things that sort of ranks you in terms of your vulnerability is your access to resources. Do you have access to resources? And you can imagine someone with great wealth that might have high access to resources because they can purchase those resources. And you can imagine someone with very limited wealth or very, very limited from a socioeconomic perspective that does not have the opportunity to purchase those resources. And all of a sudden they are differentially vulnerable because of that. And there's other situations that might make you or create an environment where you have a limited opportunity to acquire resources. And the current blockade here is an example of that. And certainly the country has done an amazing job of overcoming those limitations. But those limitations still exist and do create pressure and strain. And so that's an example when we talk about something that's relative to emergency disaster management that's sort of at the very broad level that's occurring here. And then you ask the question about how do you prepare for something that's unpreparable or for something that you don't anticipate. Well, unfortunately, in our discipline, we have to do that all the time. And we take an all hazards approach. And we try to prepare for all hazards. Fortunately, there's many sort of preparations that are the same or close to the same relative to whatever the hazard might be. But there's two different sort of approaches that we take. One is probabilistic risk assessment, where we try to prepare for the thing that is most likely to happen and might cause the greatest consequence. We try to prepare in those ways. But there's a little bit of lack of understanding around the world in terms of how we manage risk or how we assess risk. And it's difficult to prepare if you don't have a good assessment strategy. I remember sitting in a room one time, and I was the only scientist in the room among a group of individual stakeholders that were trying to assess the local risk in their community. And it was a community that was about 100 miles from the Yellowstone caldera in the US. So this Yellowstone caldera is a supervolcano that has erupted, and if it erupts again, it'll be a global threatening event. So it's likely that many won't survive if anyone survives. And when they were listing their risk in order to put together their plan, their hazard disaster management plan, they listed the Yellowstone caldera as the #1 risk to put their plan together. And they looked at me and they said, "What do you think, Dr. Frazier?" And I said, quite honestly, I think that's a waste of your time. Because if the Yellowstone caldera goes off, there is no plan. You're going to die. So why don't you focus on some things you can control? And sometimes we see in emergency disaster management where people want to try to mitigate the sexy risk or the risk that's the Hollywood TV or the Hollywood movie. They want to mitigate those risks. And we have to get people to back up. And we have to get people to address the challenges that they can actually affect and make progress, even if you can't solve everything that's out there. Because even if you make progress and you don't solve the problem of the Yellowstone caldera, or what happens if a meteor the size of Russia hits the planet, well, what's your plan for that? Don't waste your time on things you can't control, and make improvement, make steps in the right direction, even if it's for something that you may not be able, that might overwhelm you. You're still going to be better off.
I could build on Dr. Frazier's comments. Going back to your question around how do you handle a situation where the unexpected happens. Rarely does the event you plan for happen exactly the way you planned for it. In fact, it never happens that way. So as Dr. Frazier said, you try to do the best you can to analyze the breadth of the types of events, build the best plans you can, and then you practice scenario-based drills, which show you where you have access to resources, how do you access them, what team do you get together, and what questions do you ask each other. And it turns out that you kind of build a muscle memory. And when something unexpected happens, that wasn't something you drilled for, those tools come into play almost naturally. And even though you don't have a perfect plan, you have the tools to build a plan that fits the problem you have. There's a cliche, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And if you've been punched in the face a few times, you get better at managing. And so if you can get punched, pretend, at the drill, when the real one comes, you're much better off.
Thanks very much. I agree. Yes. I agree with the punches. So, right, I'm open to the audience. Dr. Sada first. The mic.
Thank you very much. It has been a very informative session. back to your question, I have, from my practical experience, I served as a safety, quality, and environment group manager back in early 90s, and we encountered different types of risks, and we responded to them. From my practical experience, it is a daunting task to analyze all possible root cause of a problem. However, that's a bad news, obviously, because you cannot cover every known unknowns and every unknown unknown. However, the good news is that you develop a scenario that, regardless of, let's say, where the oil pollution is coming from, the root cause, if you like, the reality is that desalination plant have to use their spread team and with all booms and demulsifiers and all these chemicals, and even before they know the root cause. Root cause analysis can be absolutely essential during the failure analysis of the problem, which can be very essential in the prevention. However, for the response, you need to develop a scenario. Sometimes you don't know where the fire is really to respond to the fire long before, and you need to be prepared long before you know the exact root cause. Which can be adequately analyzed, and it may take time to know it all. But for the sake of planning, we usually go by the probability of an incident to happen multiplied by the intensity, the effect of it, the disastrous effect of it. And if the frequency, the probability of something happening multiplied by how profound the impact is and how negative on the safety of people, on the facilities, or on your business, that is usually given the utmost priority. And there's an exponential relationship between the frequency and impact. So the higher the frequency, the higher the impact, the higher the preparedness we need to be geared for, and we need to have a proper plan and frequent exercises. Now, the plans. I listened to some of our colleagues here. Plans are very essential. However, from my experience, planning is even more important than the plan. And a plan could go obsolete in no time if many variances can come up, rendering the plan full of flaws. So if the processes change, the technologies changed, even the training of people changed, the source of risk changed, the plan can be obsolete. That's why constant review of the plan, i.e. to make sure that the capacity, I would like in my organization, and I was the managing director of Qatar Petroleum and managing director of RasGas, which is a partnership with ExxonMobil. In my capacity as a CEO, I was absolutely, I wanted always to make sure that the planning capacity is always there. Rather than plan and forget about it and just exercise on this plan, you will end up actually moving the wrong direction. So planning capacity, always as a leader of that organization, I would like to make sure that the planning capacity is there, the creativity is there, they respond to the real situation, emphasizing the scenarios which could impair the well-being of the staff, the integrity of the facilities and the environment. They respond to changes. Otherwise, you will risk actually having an obsolete plan to respond to. Thank you.
We have someone there in the back, yes.
I think we have time for one more question from the audience. That would be it. So.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask a question. Right, someone at the person at the back there, and then we'll comment here. Yeah? Back there.
My domain expertise is information technology, and I was working in a Qatari local bank. So QCB, Qatar Central Bank, is enforcing all the banks to have a business continuity plan and to practice each quarter or something on such plans. And I know also all the government sectors, like ministries, have its own disaster and business continuity plan. But is there any plan to have like in US there is FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, Federal Emergency Management Agency, that is having national plans to enforce each and to have plans for the government, the whole government, unified plan. This is my question.
Okay, we'll just take the comment from here on the floor, I think. In fact, I'll give you my...
Well, as you are aware that the situation that has been discussed today comes in time with the situation that we are facing here in Qatar. And with the leadership or excellent leadership from our Amir and the team that he depends on, especially Dr. Mohammed bin Saleh Al-Sada, and the international companies like Occidental Petroleum, ExxonMobil, and other international companies here, have guaranteed that all our products from oil, gas, petrochemicals has been shipped directly to our customers. This comes only when you have an excellent leadership, a leadership that you can depend on, not only here in Qatar, but also the whole world. And people and countries stood by our side and believed in our points, that we are not a country that supports terrorists or anything. So the excellent management came from this country, and the bad management came from their side. This is what Qatar is. A team that works as one person, from the leadership to ministers, especially Dr. Saleh Al-Sada and others. We thank you for being here in our country, and this is why Georgetown and other universities believed in Qatar. Thank you.
Shukran jazeelan. That kind of links in part to the previous question. I think there was one question here, and then we're going to have to wrap it up.
I'd like to thank everybody for your comments and perspectives in celebrating the inauguration of our program with us. Thank you very much. I have a question that I'd like to present to each of the panel members. And that is, what do you believe is the biggest challenge or obstacle facing the efforts to bring GCC member states to the table and actually following through with creating a robust and interoperable emergency disaster management system in the GCC?
Thank you. An appropriate question, since there was in fact a stimulus from the GCC as an organization for Georgetown to develop a GCC-wide program, which was going all very well, as I understand, until this crisis happened. Okay, so quick comment from one or any of the panel members on all you've heard so far.
I will answer the question, I think, about the national. Your question was about a national coherent plan for business continuity. Do you still work with the bank, or you moved somewhere else? Okay, good. So you have exposed to the financial sector, now you're getting exposed to the government sector. There is a plan. And if you remember, or if you recall, I mentioned that we do drills on an annual basis. We test that national plan. Cross-sector plan where finance, energy, government, and other sectors, are involved or participate. We work closely with the regulators of the financial sector. So when you are working in a bank and you received a note from QCB that you need to follow certain procedures, we work with QCB to ensure that whatever they send to the financial sector is incoherent with the national approach in this manner. So there is a national plan. I don't know which government agency you work for now, but just wait. There will be an announcement. Hopefully by October, we will announce the 2017 drill, and you're welcome to participate and practice this, being part of this national plan. I hope it's clear for you. Okay, thank you.
Any of the other panelists on any of the remarks?
I would just comment on the question around, regarding the question on how to resolve the crisis. I can't speak on behalf of ExxonMobil in terms of how it will be solved. However, I would like to comment again that the response has been impressive. So again, it's very obvious that the state has a business continuity plan. And it's very obvious also that it served as a reminder of how important that is. And you can see within our industry the pull from the government on making sure that all the companies have their own business continuity plans. And I believe that this will make us stronger. Whatever the next event is that we can expect, the things that we're doing in the state of Qatar to make it stronger are going to benefit us. It's hard to predict what that's going to be, but I think we just have to continue working together and sharing best practices and tools. And for our part, we have dozens of years of history on responding, and we're open to sharing those tools with the industry and with the government so the whole system becomes stronger.
Thank you.
I'll say, I'll back up and give you sort of a general answer that's probably not going to satisfy you, but it's I think, appropriate answer. I think everything in life is cost-benefit analysis, and you have to understand cost-benefit analysis to understand how to overcome a problem or a challenge or an issue where there's competing interests at stake. I think simply what has to happen is we have to realize, everyone has to realize that the benefit is worth the cost. And I think that's maybe an oversimplification of a very complex question. But again, I think that's where we have to get to if we want to have a more unified emergency disaster management agency, arena, program, or framework within the Middle East.
Thanks very much. I think at this point we're going to move on to the final phase with Dr. Dalal. Maybe one little connecting point to be made, linking it all back to politics. I mean, one of the reasons I think why the US has, certainly now that the president has been more educated about the circumstances here, has taken the kind of position that it has and or is now taking is, of course, not just that Rex Tillerson was with ExxonMobil and knows everyone here, but that the Gulf as a group, the GCC as a group, is actually of strategic value for the United States. And you think about, more united emergency management, emergency and disaster management, as one reason to be, to work as a group more effectively, but there's also, for instance, missile defense, which is impossible without the wider collaboration. And so one reason that clearly the United States is de facto more sympathetic to the Qatari case, I think. Anyways, let's move on to the closing part. Dean Dalal.
Georgetown University in Qatar was established to help support Qatar Foundation's goal of human, social, and economic development through education and research, and to contribute to the Qatari national vision of building a knowledge society. The university's ability to contribute to this vision is partly on account of its global reputation as a leading institution of higher learning and research, with a track record of developing future leaders for a rapidly changing world. Our primary mission, as proven by our decade of commitment in Qatar, is to help create the next generation of multi-skilled, well-rounded and professionally competent and competitive community members that Qatar needs to fulfill the vision of a healthy, engaged, economically diversified society, as detailed in the Qatar National Vision 2030. The theme of today's symposium was appropriately timed, given the challenges and opportunities that the nation and the region face now and in the years to come. The environment in which we live requires strong partnerships to ensure that together we are prepared to face the challenges of education, research, and human development. We are pleased that the launch of Georgetown's new regionally focused Executive Masters in Emergency and Disaster Management degree directly contributes to this endeavor. This degree is a good example among numerous other higher professional and executive education initiatives that Georgetown University is undertaking in Qatar. Our university remains committed to the development of new avenues of collaboration and partnership in all areas, as Qatar looks both inward and outward to become more innovative and flexible than ever before. And the liberal arts-based higher education such as Georgetown's is a key way to build the abilities, competencies, and values of both individuals and communities to address known and unknown challenges in an uncertain world. I'm confident that with the right focus, continued innovation, and the commitment to strong partnerships, we can successfully meet the challenges we face now and in the future. I want to thank His Excellency Dr. Mohammed bin Saleh Al-Sada, Minister of Energy, for his support, and I thank all of you joining us today on this important occasion. أود أن أتوجه بالشكر إلى سعادة الوزير دكتور محمد بن صالح السادة وزير الطاقة والصناعة على دعمه الكريم، وأشكر السادة السفراء والضيوف الكرام والحضور جميعا على مشاركتنا في هذه المناسبة. شكرا جزيلا. Thank you so much.